Hello, and welcome to the McKnight's Online Forum. Our first webinar for the day is Advancing Dementia Care, Insights into New Care Approaches for Home Care and Beyond. I'm McKnight's editor, Liza Berger, and I'll be your moderator for this session. Our featured speaker is Stephanie Verbitska, Director of Strategic Health Programs and co-creator of DementiaWise for ComForCare franchise systems. I'll introduce her more at length soon. First, a few housekeeping items. If you are having audio problems with this broadcast, please first check the volume control on your machine. This is the most common cause of hearing problems. Stephanie will be fielding questions during the presentation. If you have any questions for her at any time, please feel to write them out and submit them directly to us. Those we don't get to in real time will be answered afterwards. Also, this will be an interactive presentation. The chat feature is open for the audience, so please don't hesitate to use it. And there will be poll questions during the broadcast. Continuing education credits are issued through NAB. To receive CE credit, you must view a minimum of 50 minutes of the webinar during the live event. Once you have achieved 50 viewing minutes, a View Certificate button will display, and the required viewing duration will have a green checkbox. You can then view or save your certificate. If you have any questions about continuing education credits, please email mck.onlineevents@haymarketmedia.com, and we will be putting this email, or it's already in there, in the chat for you. I'd like to note that this program is made possible by support from ComForCare. Please learn more about them at ComForCare.com. Finally, this session will be archived and available on demand shortly after the live broadcast. You can access it again, or others can experience it for the first time. Simply go to the registration page to enter the studio. The URL is mcknights.com/060424 MCK Online Forum. Now to our presenter. Stephanie Verbitska has been employed with ComForCare franchise systems, an in-home care agency with 275 locations in the United States and Canada for 20 years. She is a certified dementia practitioner. She is responsible for developing and managing various company programs aimed at improving client care and health-related outcomes. Numerous in-person visits to facilities, hospitals, and seniors living in their homes has allowed her to understand and experience the unique needs of professionals and clients firsthand, and as a result, given her the unique opportunity to develop programs that can help older adults and their families live their best lives possible. She is the co-creator of ComForCare, At Your Side, proprietary training program, DementiaWise, recognized by the Alzheimer's Association as meeting best practices for patient-centered care. So, Stephanie, dementia is one of the major health crises today among older adults. You're going to break down the stages of the illness for us during your presentation and talk to us about the latest approaches to helping patients at each stage. Did I summarize that correctly?
You sure did, and that's correct. And thank you so much for that introduction. And I just want to let you all know that I am so happy to be here with all of you today and can't wait to dive into this rich content that has been developed specifically to raise awareness around effective care strategies that exist along the timeline of dementia and enable you to apply these strategies into your practice. Many of you with us today are licensed professionals, and so for the sake of today's presentation, I'm going to be referring to all individuals on the call today as caregivers, even if you aren't involved in bedside care. All of us, whether we're a family care member caring for an individual with dementia, a frontline caregiver, nurse, or social worker, we are all playing a role to improve the lives of those living with dementia and the care they receive. Now, for the purposes of today's webinar, we will explore 4 key learning objectives, and attendees will be able to define dementia and highlight why caregiving for individuals with dementia differs from other types of caregiving, describe the key stages of disease progression and the importance of recognizing how these stages impact caregiving strategies, identify and discuss care strategies that are grounded in evidence-based practice, highlighting the effectiveness of advanced staff training, and describe 3 best practices for aligning care strategies with the individualized caregiver plan of care. So let's dive into that first key learning objective, defining dementia and why caregiving differs from other types of care. So many of us have a good understanding of dementia, but what I want to note is I often find the general public is not aware of the true definition and how important it is to share collective knowledge with families, caregivers, and teammates. So first, dementia is defined as an observable, irreversible decline in skills, severe enough to impact the person's daily memory, attention, language, judgment, and so on. We do use dementia as an umbrella term that describes varying types with over 400 that have been identified so far. Alzheimer's being the most common type of dementia, followed by vascular dementia, Lewy body dementia, and more. The cause depends on the type, which many are unknown. And for the purposes of this presentation, I will be referring to dementia as a universal term for many of the strategies suggested today, as they can apply to any individual living with dementia regardless of type or stage they are in. Because there is no cure yet, we're all left with simply reducing symptoms with medication and non-pharmacological approaches to care. I like to say when there's no cure, there's care. Now, the FDA has recently approved some medications that fall into two categories: drugs that change disease progression in people living with early Alzheimer's disease, and drugs that may temporarily mitigate some symptoms of Alzheimer's dementia. While approved, some are quite expensive and come with some side effects that individuals may experience and as a result end the treatment plan. Either way, it is very exciting to see these advances in the treatment of the disease. Now, as time goes on, dementia is characterized by its progressive decline along a continuum which begins with requiring only minimal help to eventually needing total assistance with self-care. The definitive answer of what unites all dementia is brain cell death, which eventually impacts all areas of function. The most important thing we can do for families and care teams today is provide solutions-based, team-centered training that can provide a positive approach to care and what is really at the heart of this presentation. Now, because the person with dementia is experiencing their environment in a different way from us, the only real effective treatment, so to speak, is our non-pharmacological approach to help support the person and where they're at in the timeline of their dementia. Also, due to brain cell death, it's important to recognize that dementia impacts 14 functional areas, which is much different from other disease states, which typically may only impact one or two areas. Because of this, care and support needs to be sensitive to the person because as the disease impacts abilities, their words may not always work, which makes it difficult to express needs, and as a result, we often see agitation or aggression as a form of expression. As caregivers, we must take an approach to observe other areas and help interpret what the person may feel or what reactions mean and what the person is trying to tell us. I always like to say, look at the meaning behind the behavior. Because of this, our typical standard approach to care, using logical, open-ended questions, engaging the individual in an in-depth conversation about health-related goals, may fall flat. And this really does require taking a different approach, or what I suggest being the most effective, a person-centered care approach to care. Prior to person-centered care, there's what I call reality therapy, meaning if a person was looking for their deceased spouse, or our response may have been, "I told you just a few minutes ago, Harold died 3 years ago. Your daughter sold your home, and now you live here in Green Acres Retirement Village." The resident then says, "What do you mean Harold died? He died?" "Yes, he died, but you're fine, and now it's time for your art activity. Can you just come start it with me now?" Now, I don't know about you, but that is not the way I would want to be spoken to if I can't put all the facts together in my mind as to why Harold died. I can't remember the past 3 years, and I can only grab from my long-term memory, which tells me he and I are happily married. So hearing this information for the 5th time today is as if I heard it for the first time. Now imagine going through that emotional experience 5 times in one day. The movement and philosophy of care that is adopted by most healthcare professionals is person-centered care approach. It calls on us to get to know individuals and their situations through an interpersonal relationship, which means building authentic relationships with trust and love. Now, achieving person-centered care requires everyone within an organization to play a role in delivering it. because when we're all approaching care in the same way, it optimizes quality of life and is the best way to help people live happier, healthier lives at home or in a place that feels like home for as long as possible. Now, person-centered care has been around since 1980, so it isn't new and was actually designed by Tom Kitwood. He defined dementia care as treating just the disease or thinking of dementia diagnosis alone as the wrong approach due to a highly variable, progressive condition without a cure. It challenges us to be aware of symptoms while looking deeper to see what's beneath behaviors. And dementia is best understood as an interplay between neurological changes and psychosocial factors. Physical health, history, the environment, and social context are all influencing the person with dementia, and any of these factors may hold clues for why the person feels or behaves the way they do if the person can't fully tell us. So this requires us to recognize dementia as constantly impacting the person's brain function, behavioral responses, functional abilities, and sense of well-being. But with observation and positive communication, we can form authentic relationships. It also calls on us as caregivers to remain flexible and adjust our support based on the individual in that moment and on that day. When looking at person-centered care, it's important to realize that there are 5 fundamental principles, which include, first, we need to maintain personhood, which recognize the inherent value and dignity in each person, honors a person's story, and the things that make them who they are. Second, we need to foster relationships with respect, trust, and recognition. Third, we have to support social engagement. Humans are social, and our lives are more meaningful when we feel connected with others. This remains a preserved strength for folks living with dementia. Fourth, we want to create comfortable, flexible, and safe environments. And lastly, adjust care and strategies as the person or their situation changes. We have to accept the challenge to change with individuals, adapting our support based on their preferences, histories, current needs, and abilities as their life is still unfolding. Now, the benefits of person-centered care might be obvious, but what it does is optimizes quality of life, maintains dignity, shows respect, and allows an individual to retain lifetime values, which leads to greater acceptance of care and more meaningful, positive moments. Taking a patient-centered or a person-centered care approach to care requires us to recognize that we need to leverage as many known abilities and engage that individual in meaningful care and experiences. So many individuals assume there are only areas lost, but there are so many preserved, which is represented on this table. So as we approach care through the lens of person-centered care, we must understand that individuals with dementia still have many areas preserved. And when we engage them in these, it promotes self-esteem and helps to preserve their personhood. Okay, so let's do a little activity and apply what we just learned. If you could, get out a piece of paper, and I'm getting mine too. So if you could just grab a piece of paper and a pencil and a pen. What I'd like you to do is draw a line in the middle of the paper. Okay, so just draw a line right through the middle. And on the left side, I want you to write down the numbers 1 through 10. So I'm doing that too. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And if you can, do that on the right side of that line as well. So you have 2 lists, numbers 1 through 10. Now, on the left side, I want you to write down all your answers to the questions in blue. And on the right side, I want you to write down all of your answers to the questions in orange. And I'll give you a couple minutes to complete this. So this is just a quick one-word answer type activity with no right or wrong ones. So for example, if I were to write out my answer to question number 1 in blue, favorite activity for exercise, I'm going to write down a single word that says walking. Okay, so let's go ahead and just take a couple minutes to write out our answers to all of these questions. I'm working on my second list of questions. Okay, so I just kind of wrapped up here myself. It took me a second to think about my favorite band or song from the 20s, maybe for you too. So now what I'd like you to do is on the left column, okay, all of the answers you answered in blue, I want you to cross out 7 areas you could live without, okay? It's going to be hard, but I need you to do that. So cross off 7 things you can live without. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I just crossed off my 7, which is extremely difficult. Now, what I like you to do on the right side is just cross off 1 item. Okay. And that's really hard to do, right? Now imagine you're the person living with dementia. Everything on the left represents the things that are lost, and everything on the right represents the things that remain. Taking a person-centered care approach requires we put ourselves in the shoes of the individual living with dementia and consider how the world around them is changing, how their favorite people, hobbies, and interests are often lost. It is when we start realizing the impact of loss has on our own lives, then I truly believe we can begin empathizing more with others. For those of you that operate in a facility like an ILF or ALF, or even if you were to move into one down the road, are those individuals living in a way that helps support their desires? Some of these things on our list are simple, but really meaningful to us as people. And as we transfer into an aging society with more and more individuals diagnosed with dementia, we may end up putting less emphasis on meeting these needs. However, they remain of preserved strength and need for those living with dementia. The challenge is how can we adapt to those we support? How can we be fluid in meeting their needs? Okay, so let's do a quick recap. We learned that person-centered care is a philosophy of care that includes 5 fundamental principles. And because people living with dementia is a dynamic situation, if we can notice and improve a situation that person-centered care calls us to do, then we can truly help individuals live more happy, productive lives despite having no cure for the disease itself. Now we're going to transition into our next key learning objective, which is looking at the key stages of dementia and its impact on care. Understanding the timeline of dementia is important because delivering person-centered care for people with a progressive disease presumes that we can meet them where they are and adjust our support to keep pace with their evolving needs. The timeline I'm going to share with you today has 3 levels. It happens to be the description most commonly referred to by the Alzheimer's Association as early, middle, and late. Now, others may have read mild, moderate, severe. Either way you say it, it's the same 3-tiered system. Now, here at ComForCare and At Your Side, in our proprietary dementia training program, DementiaWise, we have adopted this best practice and have also made a slight change to the middle stage and have created a first and second half to better understand some of the toughest challenges that occur in the longest stage often presented in the timeline that I'll share with you today. Now, staging helps determine how much help and what kind of help individuals may need. What works for an individual in early stage of their journey is very different from the best matched support in later stages. If we aim to be person-centered in our work, we must accept the challenge to adapt with individuals over time. So let's look at the first stage in our timeline. For the person in early stage, there are signs that something is different and significant enough to impact daily life, but the early signs may not be apparent to everyone who meets the person. At this stage, family, close friends, or caregivers who know the person well may be the only ones who notice the signs. A doctor would be able to identify early stage symptoms using certain diagnostic tools, but they may need to hear from someone in that person's inner circle about a change they've noticed in order to complete the best, most comprehensive assessment. Otherwise, the person could breeze through the doctor's visit with her usual social skills and literally miss an opportunity for early detection and treatment. The Alzheimer's Association points to difficulties that, if the problems were new or unusual for the person, could signal an early sign of brain change and should be checked out by a doctor. With this stage, families do realize something's different, mainly when a problem arises around a routine change. You might notice an individual wants and needs to do activities the same old way in their familiar routine, and they can't switch it up. If they get interrupted in the middle, they might have to start all over again from the beginning, and that can easily frustrate them. See, they're relying on a memory file that works for them in the early stage called situational memory. Situational memory works in this way in your brain. You understand how things got this way and what to do next in the right order because situational memory holds the facts about a situation together in order. We take it for granted, but every situation has an order to it. It's how you know why you're sitting in that seat and what you should be doing right now. Typically, the person can do things the way they've always done them if it's familiar and in the rhythm of their usual day. And if they get stuck, you can automatically support it, which helps the person stay on track, which makes life easier for them and their caretakers. So now some basic strategies make sense in early stage. Situational memory is a strength, so they can thrive with the familiar order of the routine. As caregivers, we got to be ready to flex because people in early stage dementia just aren't as flexible as they once were. Respect the way they like to do things and their personal preferences. Also, they can still and want to need to be engaged in meaningful activities. They can complete a lot of tasks on their own and follow simple instructions. I also need to note that the emotional tone of our communication is important here too, because people in early stage dementia don't want to feel incompetent. I mean, honestly, does anyone? When reminders are built into the environment, caregivers say they feel like their communication returns to friendly social communication, which means a more positive experience for all. Now, as I mentioned before, middle stage is oftentimes the longest and presents the most significant behavioral and functional changes, which requires it to be split into two substages, first and second half. Distinguishing characteristics of these two substages are important because characteristics of each are quite different and require different strategies. During middle stage, signs are more pronounced. Individuals can get easily frustrated and might experience more confusion about where they are or how they got here. The most obvious sign that an individual is past the early stage is the routine isn't enough anymore and they can't make it at home by themselves. Often, if you watch a person in the first half of middle stage, you'll notice they have trouble with the steps of the task because situational memory, which helps you understand how things got this way and what to do in the next order, is not as strong as it was in the previous stage. Individuals in this stage just want to get it done and feel like they can do it, but they mess up the order of the steps and can't go back and fix their mistakes. Another complex brain function that is starting to change and display noticeable signs is executive function, which impacts functional status and safety. And the person at this stage may not understand how things got this way, why the situation is problematic, or what to do to remedy things. Because they can't always predict the consequences of their mistakes, the person may indicate they don't need help, even though there are risks around financial management, driving, home maintenance, medication management, and personal care. Personal care is impacted especially as situational memory and executive function decline. The person could easily put on the same dirty clothes as yesterday. Sleep patterns change with more naps during the day and becoming restless at night. With situational memory and executive function changing, individuals lose track of time and routine and do things out of order. Organizing food and drinks can lead to individuals skipping meals or overeating the wrong things or forgetting to drink healthy fluids. A person in first half of middle stage dementia may start struggling with bowel and bladder routines. Due to changes in the brain in this stage, you might notice that individuals aren't recognizing the early signals of needing to get to the bathroom. There are also signs in the bathroom that things don't get used in the right order or steps are skipped. Without all the steps of personal hygiene, folks in this stage also don't get all the way clean and dry, and reinfections or reoccurrent infections are common. Communication is also changing, but those mistakes may be subtle. In the first half of middle stage, lots of who, what, when, where, why questions are asked and are situational memory questions. They're trying to figure out how things got this way, what's happening now, why it's happening that way, and what they should expect to happen next. Immediate recall is starting to change, which is a memory file for what just happened. It's just that fast. It's what I just said. Getting a call 47 times a day asking the same question is an example of this. So in this stage, good motor memory is still viable along with emotional memory, which allows a person to pick up on a vibe. Now, arguments between people with dementia and their caregivers aren't illegal, but they are unhelpful. All of us caregivers can take a deep breath and check ourselves. to avoid an escalating argument. Using the right communication approach is key, like using automatic back and forth rhythm of social greetings and chit chat to establish a positive emotional connection can make a task or a visit go in the right direction. Now, for the first time, the caregiver's communication must shift from focus on the facts with long explanations and instructions to focus on the feelings. Expect repeated questions and try to answer consistently to give the individual a better chance at holding the information they so desperately want. Also, engaging in meaningful activities can be a proactive strategy for dealing with distress. In addition to leisure and self-care activities, consider adding daily productive activities like housework, yard work, or even previous work the person did earlier in their life, which can lend a feeling of accomplishment, satisfy the person's need to be needed, honor their full personhood, and create a more balanced daily routine. Now, your tall tale sign that the person is moving from first half to the second half of middle stage is the step-by-step setup isn't enough anymore. Also, motor memory, the way you move your body on automatic pilot, like walking as usual by just putting one foot in front of the other, becomes compromised. Additional signs arise when an individual in the stage needs hands-on care, but they resist touch and assistance because it feels uncomfortable, startling, or intrusive. This results in distress in the form of resistance to care. How the person spends time around the house is another observable change that indicates a person is progressing into second half of the middle stage. In this stage, the person has less coordination and doesn't use objects as well, touching everything as if they're exploring through their senses. And this can be a difficult time since some of the challenges in this stage just don't have a quick fix. Changes in skills and abilities in this stage are pretty drastic, and individuals will need more hands-on help to do simple self-care tasks. Changes are more than just regular fluctuation between good days and bad or specific times of the day, as required help is continuous. You can also notice that motor memory declines, like handing an individual a common object, but the person doesn't know what to do with it. So for example, a person can hold a toothbrush and put it in their mouth, but needs guidance and verbal cues to complete the task. Language also begins to deteriorate as it did in previous stages. However, formal language is now impacted. So you may hear more repetitive rhythmic language, sometimes sounding sing-songy like there, yep, 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 love you, love you, love you. They may require several additional seconds to process, understand, and respond. Immediate recall continues to deteriorate, and repetitive comments or questions may come back to back, asking questions like, where's my wife? And boom, 2 seconds later again, where's Susan? The difference in second half of the middle stage is he could be talking to his wife. He may be thinking of himself at an early time in his life and thinking of his wife as a young woman. He doesn't recognize the older woman's face, but he may still feel like she belongs to him. Emotional memory is preserved all the way to the end of the disease, so he can have a feeling without the facts. This mix-up about who everyone is, what chapter of life he's in, combined with the need to feel like he and everyone else he loves is safe, has individuals feeling desperate for answers. More sensitivity to the environment becomes prevalent. When things used to be fine, now feel uncomfortable, like the water's too hot, too prickly, too uncomfortable. Now, as the person's disease progresses, they experience increasingly difficulty with sensory processing. This is in addition to the regular sensory changes that come with aging, which presents a range of challenges in daily life for the person with dementia and their caregivers. Now, some key strategies I want to share only scratch the surface, and I wish I had more time. But just for the sake of timing, I wanted to share a few that I think are really important. So first, when it comes to personal care as a caregiver, okay, you can adjust the environment to make sensory processing easier and more comfortable. Avoid startling the person in your approach and maintain a friendly, respectful tone of voice. Give gentle guidance through the first steps of the task, and once they're participating and sort of warmed up with a few repetitions of movement, see if they can do some or part of the tasks themselves. Address incontinence with a positive approach by taking the opportunity while in the bathroom to help freshen up. Swap toilet paper for a warm washcloth and keep a stack of clean washcloths in that place for convenience. Even consider trading traditional briefs for disposable pull-ups and consider changing clothes in the bathroom. You can also consider improving eating by first recognizing that individuals in this stage have a hard time with texture, swallowing, and not liking the same foods they enjoyed for years. Further, with motor memory declining, they might have a hard time remembering the steps of how to scoop up food and get it to their mouth, and can often benefit from eating a meal with someone who provides those visual cues. You can improve sleep by limit napping or incorporate a short nap earlier in the day, staying active and aiming for 30 minutes of activity per day, like walking. And of course, increase light exposure, which has healthy chemical effects on our brain and body. Research suggests that even a weighted blanket may help with anxiety and insomnia, and it may help facilitate better sleep. As time marches on, the person with dementia continues to change. In the late stage, individuals require around-the-clock assistance with daily personal care. Just like in earlier stages, changes in an individual's behavior and functional status can be road signs that they've progressed into the late stage of the disease. Here's some late stage signs we can all observe and adjust for. So the person in late stage needs physical help getting started, even moving out of a chair or taking the first step in standing. Once they get started, they often need help to stop. So caregivers who've never heard of that may think, oh, mom just likes to walk all day. But if you pay close attention, you can tell the woman with advanced dementia is very tired. Her walking is getting worse as the day goes on, and she stumbles more in the afternoon. It's because she needs help to stop and rest. She can't get into the chair as easily as she used to. Now, have you ever known someone to sit down and pop right back up 1,000 times? That stuck-on-go behavior is predictable at this stage. Also, have you ever known someone in this stage to fall asleep and sleep for days? It's because the part of the central nervous system that controls sleep-wake cycles is continuing to decline. The flip side of that is that they could be up for days. Now, as motor memory and situational awareness continue to fade in late stage, it becomes very difficult for folks to use their hands with purpose. But they may still find comfort in holding a favorite object, rubbing, patting, clapping their hands, or holding yours. People in late stage are losing awareness of recent experiences and their surroundings. Their communication is severely limited, and you might only hear sounds more than words. So it's increasingly important for all caregivers to notice facial expressions and listen to the tone of voice in those sounds. Those nonverbal signals are how they communicate their feelings. And people in late stage dementia still want and need friendly communication. So some effective care strategies in this stage include, if you notice this person enjoying an activity, it may look like they're just watching or imitating others, but that could be just the right participation for them. Remember, these individuals still want and need to feel pleasure and kindness, so keep that good social chit-chat alive, even if it feels like a one-way conversation, and give them a chance to respond. During physical care, or personal care, music, other rhythmic language like chit-chat and prayer can ease a person's distress. Even though they may no longer understand your words, your voice tone can still be a soothing presence. Individuals with late-stage dementia will eventually have difficulty swallowing, and aspiration pneumonia is predictable when their brain loses control over the automatic movements inside the body. Adjusting food and liquid to be smooth, thick consistency can make it easier for an individual to swallow or delay the aspiration a little longer. When the sleep cycle becomes erratic, which is predictable, stay ready to offer multiple small meals and plenty of fluids during those wake times because you don't know exactly when they'll be asleep or awake. Individuals in this late stage are vulnerable to infections. Even with the very best care, infections are predictable as the disease progresses due to the breakdown of the immune system. There are ways we can reduce the risk of infections by helping the person stay clean and dry as much as possible. Caregivers can get good at recognizing the signs of infection and getting treatment ready and to help curtail the symptoms. These are all signs that the person is nearing the end of the disease, and we encourage all members of your team and healthcare providers of all stripes to talk to families and your teammates about the person's advanced directives and end-of-life care choices before they reach end of dementia's timeline unexpectedly, as we all must be ready at any time to implement the person's advanced directives. Honoring an individual's final wishes is another final way of honoring their personhood and remaining person-centered in our care all the way through end of life. Okay, so I did a little talking here, so I want to take a break, and let's just do a little brain break here through a little pop quiz. So let's try to apply our knowledge just to the middle stage, okay? So if you could please answer in the poll, what is a good example of what not to do when someone is experiencing distress in the first half of middle stage? So go ahead and choose A, if your communication strategies for dealing with stress are falling flat. First, remember to check yourself. B, ask to put a schedule together and point out what still needs to be completed. C, enter the person's reality. D, listen and affirm the person's feelings and redirect. Or E, consider putting the person on the team by inviting them to help you with a productive activity. Okay, so it looks like a majority of us selected B, which is correct. So now I have a question for you guys, and if you can actually put this in the chat. Why do you think B is the wrong approach? Why don't we want to point out what still needs to be completed? So I'm just curious what you guys think. So if you want to just throw it in the chat. It is correct. We don't want to put a schedule together of the day's activities and then point out what still needs to be completed. Why is that not a person-centered approach to care? How could you explain that? Okay. Could cause stress. Yep. It's a reminder that something didn't go well. It's demeaning. It's overwhelming. Yeah. It's pointing out flaws, right? Could cause stress. It could cause more upset. All right. You guys got this. So many of you said in just summary here that it isn't a positive approach, and pointing out the facts isn't going to help anyone when individuals in this stage still need our step-by-step support. So excellent. Okay, let's do another one. Okay, so the second question is, what are some of the key areas that are deteriorating in the second half of middle stage dementia? So what I want you to do is try to choose all that apply in the poll. Okay, so go ahead and choose the ones that you think apply. Now, I will give you a hint, there's more than one right answer. So in this instance, you're not just picking the best one, you're choosing all that apply. Oh, and you can only click one. Oh, okay. Well, I'll give you the answer. It's all. All of them are actually correct. And the reason for that is we can see that in second half of middle stage really impacts all areas of function and how they're able to process incoming information. And sorry, I just advanced the slides. I see that most of you are saying you need more time, but you can only select one. So that's why I advanced it anyway. So basically all of the items listed here are correct. Okay. So as a caregiver, it's a good reminder that we all need to be ready to flex and assist the individual with those remaining abilities that they have in this stage, like emotional memory, motor memory, personal preferences, music memory, and more. All right, so let's do a quick recap. So what we learned is every person's experience of dementia is individual, but we can predict some common challenges in each stage and become expert noticers and creative problem solvers as individuals with dementia needs and abilities change. Dementia's timeline is often explained in 3 levels, but it can be helpful to divide the middle stage into a first and second half to better understand some of the toughest challenges. It's also important to tailor interventions based on the individual's unique needs, preferences, and preserve strengths, not just losses. And finally, changes in memory, language, judgment, impulse control, sensory processing, and motor coordination appear like road signs, helping us understand what stage an individual may be in and adjust our approach to best support them in that stage. Okay, thanks for keeping up with me. I know I'm talking fast. There's just so much to share with you guys that I am just trying to get through this. So I really do honor the content and really present to you the real objectives of this presentation. So for our third key learning objective is learn evidence-based practice strategies and highlight the effectiveness of advanced staff training. So I like to say those of us in healthcare related positions that support individuals with dementia, we have tasks to perform, right? We have schedules to maintain, which doesn't always make it easy to implement some of these suggestions I'm making. However, with a little collaboration and team-oriented approach to care, we always say that two heads are better than one. And in order to provide the very best in care, we look at ways to invest in our team and collaborate on how to develop the right approach for those we care for. Most teams are looking for regular, proactive times to meet and be able to describe challenges, which allows teams to get to the root cause of why an individual may not be participating in activities, taking medications on time, or eating breakfast like everyone else. Individuals with dementia just aren't being difficult, and their actions and behavior are telling us a greater story. There are two evidence-based strategies I want to share with you today that help support advanced training. These two strategies support the principle that in order to be effective at dementia care, it isn't just having access to facts and figures about dementia. It's how you transfer that knowledge into practice. The first evidence-based strategy is a care collaboration approach called DICE. And I'm curious if anyone has used DICE in their practice, and if you can, throw that in your chat feature and how it's impacted your team. So have you ever heard of a caregiver say it's one thing to know about dementia and it's another to actually do dementia care in real life? Well, at the heart of this gap is the inadequacy of knowledge alone in helping teams resolve their most challenging cases. DICE is a case analysis process, okay, of gathering, sharing, and calling on knowledge to resolve problems in the care environment. Team from McKnight's, I am getting messages in the chat that no one is seeing my slides. Can you confirm? DICE does not replace knowledge-based education. Instead, DICE helps your team put their knowledge and skills into action with simple, generalizable processes for planning and testing interventions, okay? So there's 4 steps. DICE is describe, investigate, create, and evaluate. An agency or team that follows DICE will improve client care and satisfaction while helping employees feel equipped and supported. Applying DICE is simple, okay? First, you gather your team, which can be blended, and a challenge can come from anyone. Next, choose a storyteller. So who's that main person that spends the most time with that person living with dementia? And in that process, you start asking open-ended questions about the challenge and to try to get to that root cause. And in the process, you go through each of the steps. Describe the challenge, investigate what could be leading to that challenge. Next, you could create an approach or intervention. And sometimes we like to come up with more than one in that first meeting because sometimes the first might fall flat. And next, we come back together with an appropriate amount of time to evaluate, did the intervention work or not, and explore why in both instances. This is a best practice for ComForCare and is integrated into our Dementia Wise program. Another evidence-based approach to effective advanced training is something called culture change, which was spearheaded by the Pioneer Network. And just like DICE, curious if you all have heard of the Pioneer Network or something called culture change. And if you have, throw that into the chat. I'd love to know. So this movement of culture change calls on us for the transformation of older adult services based on person-directed values, the ones we learned earlier in the presentation, where the voices of elders and those working most closely with them are solicited, respected, and honored. This is a culture shift which requires us to change from a breakfast is at 8 a.m. with meat and potatoes to asking ourselves and others, what are their cultural preferences? What time do those we care for normally wake up? And are they receiving something they're accustomed to? This is a great philosophy of care to consider integrating into your own practice or place of work and utilize as a training mechanism to improve care delivery. So I want to show you a video that is a great example of culture change taking place in a community today. So I'm going to go ahead and start this. I just love that video. And I think applying the concepts of Hukovic and what we just saw isn't difficult. Now, hear me out. It just requires a different mindset. So creating a normal life for individuals living with dementia is honestly something we all need. And that's the purpose of sharing that video with you. And applying advanced training doesn't always need to lean on additional facts and figures. Really, we know our best approach is matching our support and care based on the timeline of dementia. When we get stuck, using DICE helps us get to the root cause of those distressful events or behaviors. And as a team, we can find the best solution, test, and apply. Using the concept of Pioneer Network and inspiring a movement of culture change requires us to think about how we honor personal preferences, movement, past experiences, and typical routines into that individual's unique care plan. Now, before we go on to our last learning objective, I have a quick question for you. And if you guys can place this into the chat, that'd be great. So let me just ask you all a quick question. What is a way you find purpose in your day? Okay. And just go ahead and list that out in the chat. So I'm going to tell you the way I find purpose in my day is by planting a tomato plant. I have to have a fresh tomato in the summer. Otherwise, it is not summer for me. And I am completely obsessed. Okay. So that's one way I find purpose. What's another way you guys find purpose? Okay. Being outside, going for a hike. Yep. Time with my dogs, walking, prayer, accomplishing something, no matter what it is. Who cares, right? Just feeling the sense of completing, helping others. Yes. And honestly, all these ways we find purpose is wonderful. Love it. Now, culture change requires us to recognize that folks living with dementia have these needs too, and asks us to take the time to ask them or their families, how do they find purpose? And how can we meet their needs as to what they define as purposeful living? If an individual is sitting all day and one of their ways they find purpose was to walk daily like me, or plant a tomato plant, or read prayer, or being able to get out and walk your dogs and exercise, we have to ask ourselves, are those that we work with getting their daily needs met, their basic needs met, the things that they find purposeful in how they live? This is just an example of how culture change challenges us to think beyond routines and schedules and take a personalized approach to care. So for our last key learning objective, what I wanted to talk about were some best practices for aligning care strategies with the individualized caregiver plan of care. So I'm going to share 3 best practices, with the first being designing an effective care plan, which should integrate an interview. We have to start by understanding who this person is, right? Through something I like to call a social history assessment, just something that helps us really get to know an individual we care for. We know that taking a person-centered approach to care requires we understand their personhood. And when this is at the forefront, we are able to integrate these into the first day. The caregivers and their teams are more successful in engaging that person in a positive experience, wherever the person may call home. Second, we want to align the care plan, requiring those of us in a supervisory and executive position to inspire the team to participate in team collaboration, and to also feel empowered to literally raise their hand when they notice something not working, and have a supportive team response by coming together. Consider DICE or other means familiar with your team. And again, I said this before, 2 heads are always better than 1, and we must always come together for the betterment of individuals living with dementia. And finally, my third recommendation is always to match ability with care approach. Our care plans need to be revisited frequently, and as caregivers notice those observable road signs that things aren't working quite like they used to, can actually signal a potential change from one stage to the next. And that requires a new modification and approach to help support the person in their timeline of dementia so they can continue to find meaning and purpose, which translates to greater acceptance of care. I want to thank you all for joining us today and for taking time to learn more about new approaches for dementia care and aligning them along the timeline of dementia. looks like we might just have 3 minutes left. Not sure if we have any time for questions.
That was terrific. Yes, let's do one question, okay?
Sure.
Yes, here's a question from the audience. Would the weighted blanket be considered a restraint if the resident cannot remove it upon command?
It could be. And if that's reason of concern, then it wouldn't be a suggested strategy. Obviously, we do not want to place any restraints on an individual. And if that's not a viable option for that individual, you simply would not use it.
Okay. Then 30 seconds, no more. When designing a dementia caregiver education, how long should a training program be?
So I always like to think of an individual's ability to accept and absorb information. With dementia, there is so much to cover. A best practice for ComForCare is we have core training and then we have additional supplemental training, which is the suggested approach I like making. And so what I mean by that is have a core dementia training program. Okay, so your core could be 2, 3, 4, 5 hours. I wouldn't suggest any more than 5 being your core content. And then as you identify different gaps in your particular environment, then you can continue to create additional modules that help support those additional needs for training. But you always have to start with that core training and add additional supplement training that always matches what that core teaching principle is, if that makes sense.
Terrific. I hope everybody has enjoyed this webinar. I know I have. It will be available shortly at mcknights.com/060-424-MCK online forum. I'd like to give a very special thank you to our presenters, Stephanie Wierbicka of ComForCare. Please learn more about ComForCare at ComForCare.com. Do not go away. Up next at 1:30 p.m. is the Foundation to Solving Healthcare's Biggest Problems. How can you not attend that one? Thank you all so much for tuning into this webinar. You have been a big part of the success today with your wonderful participation. This is Liza Berger for McKnight's.